Good evening. My name is Susan Smerek, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area. I welcome you to tonight's forum featuring candidates for the 5th Ward of the Ann Arbor City Council. The candidates will be on the ballot in the primary election on Tuesday, August 8th. We are broadcasting this evening from the studios of CTN of Ann Arbor. The League of Women Voters is pleased to be sponsoring these forums. The League is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that does not support candidates or parties. However, we do take stands on issues we've studied. One of the League's important goals is to assist voters in making informed choices at the polls, and thus we bring you tonight's program. The League wishes to acknowledge and thank Ann Arbor voters for their many questions. For this primary, we received 88 questions, more than we have ever received for our candidate forums. In addition, we wish to thank League members, CTN, the Civ City Initiative, and a group of Ann Arbor Pioneer High School students for spreading the word about contributing questions to these forums. We are very grateful, and we wish to applaud your civic engagement. Volunteers from the League of Women Voters are facilitating tonight's forum. Our moderator this evening is Jeffrey Smerek, who will explain the process from here.
Thank you, Susan. And now it's my honor to introduce the two candidates for the Ann Arbor City Council from Ward 5, Mr. Chip Smith and Mr. David Silkworth. Thank you, candidates. The forum today will have this format. Each candidate will have an opening statement of up to 1 minute. Each candidate will have a closing statement of up to 2 minutes. In between, the moderator will ask the questions which came from the Ann Arbor community. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to a question. At appropriate times, the timers will hold up their paddles with the amount of time remaining and then finally a stop sign. Candidates, of course, please stop when indicated so that all have an equal opportunity to participate. The order of speaking was determined by a drawing before we began. Opening first will be David Silkworth, and first with the closing statement will also be Mr. David Silkworth. Our timers are today are League members Mona Waltz and Mike McGregor. Mr. Silkworth, we're ready for your opening statement.
Good evening. I'm David Silkworth, and I'm running for the Ann Arbor City Council Ward 5 City Council seat in the August 8th Democratic primary. I'm running for City Council because I've spoken with a lot of Ward 5 voters who are very concerned with my opponent and his consistent record for voting for big developers and against residents and neighborhoods. Ward 5 voters have told me that they're very upset that my opponent, who calls himself a progressive Democrat, actually cast a vote to exclude them from having an opportunity to vote on a very important public policy issue. I'm a progressive Democrat, and if you elect me, I'll both listen to your concerns and be responsive and responsible in how I approach the issues. Please visit my website, votedavidsilkworth.org, or my Facebook page, David Silkworth for City Council, for more information about my campaign. I want to thank voters, the League, I want to thank the League for hosting and voters for watching this important event, and I look forward to spending time with you this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Silkworth. And now your opening statement, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. I'm 5th Ward Ann Arbor City Council member Chip Smith. I'm a Democrat, and I'm running for re-election in the August 8th Democratic primary. I'm an urban planner by trade. I'm a 22-year resident of the 5th Ward, but I'm perhaps most proud to be the husband of Courtney, the father of 2 wonderful girls, and the assistant coach of the Boss School Tigers first grade girls soccer team. I mention these things because Ann Arbor is a special place for me and for my family, as it is for most of you watching this evening. Keeping those things that make our city so great takes a lot of work. It takes working with those with different viewpoints. It takes building coalitions and consensus and keeping an open mind. In the end, it's about making sure Ann Arbor is special not only for current generations, but will be for future generations as well. And that's why I'm running for re-election. Been working hard to make sure Ann Arbor is as wonderful for my future grandchildren as it is for me and my contemporaries. That's why I'm asking for your vote in the Democratic primary on August 8th.
Thank you, candidates, for your opening statements. And now we go to the questions. Mr. Silkworth, you get the first question. Some have argued that creating more population density downtown is a positive. Since 2010, the number of residents in downtown Ann Arbor has more than doubled from 3,000 residents to 6,000. Population growth is projected to continue with thousands of more housing units planned or under construction. What is your position on the number and type of new housing units in the downtown area?
Well, I'm greatly concerned that a lot of the housing that's been developed recently has actually removed our more affordable housing and put in housing that only a few can afford. I believe that having this additional density downtown will actually lead to urban sprawl. The only times in history when you create a dense urban core and you don't get sprawl are when there are either physical or legal barriers that prevent that. Unfortunately, neither of those exist in our city or around our city. And so I'm very concerned that by transforming our city and creating a very dense urban core, we're actually going to, perpetuate gentrification and create a city that is that's even less diverse than it is today. One of the reasons that I chose to live in Ann Arbor after I graduated from the University of Michigan was because Ann Arbor was this really great town with this really, everybody was mixed in together, and we're losing that. We're pushing our people at lower or middle incomes out to the fringes of our city, and that's not the kind of Ann Arbor I want to see.
Thank you, Mr. Silkworth. And now, Mr. Smith, same question to you. What is your position on the number and type of new housing units in the downtown area?
Well, when I think about housing and I think about downtown, I think that the idea that we're only putting housing units downtown is the root of the problem, and that's where our concentration about density is. And the reason that there's such an emphasis and such a focus on people building bigger buildings with more density downtown is that's the only place that we let them do that. One of the things that we have to do a much better job of is figuring out how to provide housing that's close to jobs, have more dense housing in places where it's appropriate. So one of the things that we've been working on, or at least that I've been talking with some of my colleagues about, is the idea of a transit-oriented development overlay district at State and South State and Eisenhower, which is a major job center, and to put a lot of housing units there, remove some of the pressure on downtown. I think it's really critically important for us to create opportunities for people to live closer to jobs, particularly lower paid workers. The housing and transportation piece of affordability is absolutely huge. And when we're just talking about downtown, let's just realize that in the last 8 years, all of the buildings that have been built downtown, including the 2 dormitories, if you break those up into bedrooms, the number of units that we have added keeps pace with the university's increase in enrollment. It's not doing anything to address our housing issues.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And you get the first bite at the next question, which is, would you ever consider eliminating a current tax or decreasing the millage rate for any of the taxes that Ann Arbor residents currently pay for? If so, which taxes do you think could be lowered or eliminated?
That's a good question. I think that what we have been talking about at the city for a long time is the possibility of a local income tax. And the way that our charter is set up, we can't have both a local income tax and a property tax. So we would have to ask the voters to pass a charter amendment to allow us to have those things. But I think the important part in looking at that is making sure that current residents here aren't hit for a higher tax rate than they're paying now, that they actually see a decrease. Because the goal of a local income tax is people call it a commuter tax for a reason. When we have 70,000 people that come to work here every day, and those people aren't contributing to our tax base at all in any meaningful way, they're not paying for the roads, they're not paying for the parks, they're using them just like everybody else is, that creates an imbalance. So It's a very tough thing to get that number right, but I think we owe it to the residents of the city to do the analysis and see if that is something that we can do, because we are the regional center in Washtenaw County, and if our residents are expected to support everything we need to do, we can't do it all through property taxes.
Thank you, sir. Now, Mr. Silkworth, same question to you. Would you ever consider eliminating a current tax or decreasing the millage rate for any of the taxes that residents currently pay for? If so, which taxes do you think could be lowered or even eliminated?
Well, I think that we have a real opportunity here let me say this. The city over the next few years has a very, we're going to be in deficit spending. We need to be very responsible about any talk of changing taxation. Last fall, there was actually a conversation at the city budget review where they talked about going to an income tax. And I'm not sure, but I don't believe that it went anywhere, so I'm not sure why we're talking about that tonight. Obviously we need to, what I think we really need to do is focus on providing in services what people are paying in taxes, and being very responsible for how we spend their money. We spend a lot of money right now on consultants and on making improvements where developments occur at the taxpayer expense. The city just approved over $500,000 to upgrade the sewer system on South University because of the 13-story building that's overwhelming that system. That is something that we as taxpayers shouldn't, out in the rest of the community shouldn't have to pay for. It's in a DDA district. And so I think the DDA should pay for DDA things, and then we might be able to roll back some people's taxes as part of a more responsible spending program.
Thank you, Mr. Silkworth, and you get the first shot at this next question. Are you familiar with the method City Council uses this year to determine the city budget? If so, could that method be improved? In what ways? If you are not familiar with the method, how would you become informed and educated in order to be effective in that process if you are elected?
Well, I think that that's a very interesting question, and I think that when I go through a budget process on council, I will obviously learn all of the ins and outs of that process. That's not necessarily, knowing how to do a budget is not a qualification to be a city council person. Do you know what is? Listening to folks, representing their interests, and doing what they would like to see our city do, okay? If you're elected to office, you're taught how to deal with budgets, or you learn how to deal with budgets because you go through those processes. And the thing that people want, they want our city to return in services what they're paying in taxes. They want a responsive and responsible city government. They want safe crosswalks. They want their roads repaired. They want responsible spending, okay? And that would, so when you're talking about city budgets, you have to talk about all of those various priorities. And I think that we need to actually get our priorities right and turn them back to providing the services and infrastructure that residents want.
Thank you, sir. Same question to you, Mr. Smith. Are you familiar with the method City Council used this year to determine the city budget? If so, could that method be improved? In what ways? If you are not familiar with the method, how would you become informed and educated in order to be effective in that process if you're reelected?
I would argue that I'm pretty familiar with the process, but every process can always be improved. I would like to see a greater emphasis on more participatory budgeting to allow residents and voters to have a greater say in how we set some of these priorities. I think one of the things that's really, really critically important as you go into the budget process is understanding the ins and outs of how government works. And it's a great politics line to say, well, we can not increase staff or we can cut consultants, but at the end of the day, when we set a lot of priorities that are set by the community, somebody's got to do the work. And to simply say that we need to do more with less all the time, it's not reality. And it reflects not a very good understanding of just how lean our organization runs right now. So, as we look at the budget process, there are a lot of ways that we can bring more participation into the process, have it be a more open and more transparent process than it is now. And I think that I'm committed to continue to work towards that.
Thank you, sir. And you get the first shot at the next question, Mr. Smith. Several public housing complexes are located in Ward 5. How would you represent the concerns of low-income residents?
Well, part of the ways that I represent those is that they're constituents, and I listen to them, and I talk to them, and I knock on doors and find out what the particular issues are. But as we talk about affordability and affordable housing broadly across the city, I think it's very important to understand who's getting priced out of Ann Arbor, and it's technicians, it's teachers, it's janitors, it's craftspeople, it's artists, it's servers, it's my friends, quite frankly. And to understand just how high that housing cost burden is for working people. So, to represent them is to figure out how to solve that problem. And to solve that problem isn't by not building any more housing. It's by figuring out how to build housing responsibly in places that it's close to jobs, close to transit, so that people aren't driving in, 45 minutes from Brighton, an hour from Canton every day, and contributing carbon emissions to contributing to global warming, contributing to our traffic problem. These are all real issues. And when we talk about how do you represent the lower income people within your ward, it's understanding what their day-to-day problems are.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Silkworth, same questions to you. Several public housing complexes are located in Ward 5. How would you represent the concerns of low-income residents?
Well, I've knocked on those doors. I've spoken with those people, and let me tell you, they have a lot of the same concerns that everyone else does. People aren't different because they don't make a lot of money. People want safe crosswalks, they want adequate street lighting, they want to feel safe in their homes. And so when you talk about being responsible and how you do, and one of the other things that I want to point out here is that not only do they want those things, but they also aspire to be able to move out of low-income housing and into affordable housing, which we're not creating. We are taking down more affordable housing and putting up housing that only a few can afford. We're not doing anything meaningful by way of even taking care of the low-income housing that we have. At the library lot meeting, they talked about the leader of the housing program came out and said that the $5 million that they think is going to help save that or create affordable housing actually won't even catch us up on the maintenance that we need to do in order not to lose significant numbers of low-income units within the next 10 years. So we need to have a very, very responsible approach to how we do affordable housing so that we can ensure that we can continue to meet those needs in the future.
Thank you, sir. Now, Mr. Silkworth, you start with the next question. Recently, Ann Arbor City Council voted 8-3 to indicate how it would allocate revenue from a possible county-wide tax to support public safety and mental health services. It's rare for one local government body to give formal feedback to another local body, in this case, before the county board even voted to put the tax proposal on the ballot. Does the City Council of Ann Arbor have a responsibility to develop relationships with other public governing bodies, such as the county, the university, library, and schools? In what ways does that currently happen, and do you think there are better ways to develop those relationships?
Well, let me say that I think that was a really unfortunate political stunt pulled by my opponent and the majority on council. They came out publicly in support of something that had not even been approved at the county level, and that's really unfortunate because that millage was intended to help the most at-risk population in our community, okay? People who are opioid addicted, all right? That's a really important thing because those folks when you're addicted like that, that actually changes the physical chemistry of your brain so that you don't have the ability to make good decisions. And so we need to have proper mental health services and proper sheriff services to help those folks and to try to help them overcome those addictions. And it's unfortunate that my opponent, wanted to I don't know, find funding for affordable housing or some other thing that hadn't even been approved yet. So I think that we need to be very responsible whenever and we need to respect the process for how governance is supposed to happen. That means they get the language right, they put it forward, and then after it's been approved by voters, we can start talking about how we'll spend proceeds in the normal budgetary process.
Thank you, sir. Now, Mr. Smith, same questions to you. Does the City Council of Ann Arbor have a responsibility to develop relationships with other public governing bodies, such as the county, the university, library, and schools? In what ways does that currently happen, and do you think there are better ways to develop those relationships?
I think absolutely we have a responsibility to do that. I think this discussion on the county millage language between City Council and members of the Board of Commissioners was completely responsible, and it's what we should be doing. We should be having discussions about issues that affect us that are decided by other governmental agencies. We should have a better relationship with the Board of Regents so that when decisions are made on campus that have direct impact on the city, we have the ability to influence those decisions. I would point out that on an issue like regional transit, we absolutely have to be talking to our neighbors and influencing decisions that they make. The Regional Transit Authority millage failed, and it failed because of Macomb County. It passed overwhelmingly in Washtenaw County and in Wayne County. We should be continuing the dialogue, Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County, Wayne County, and the city of Detroit, to figure out how to run a commuter rail line. It is our responsibility because we are not an island unto ourselves. We are impacted by these people, the other boards and commissions and other elected bodies that make decisions that affect us. So it's completely responsible to reach out to try and help shape some of what comes out of those bodies and to indicate what's important to us.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And you get the first shot at the next question. What is your view of the current city funding model and process for public art? Would you recommend any changes? If so, what would they be?
I think that the model that we're at, that we've arrived at, is the result of years and years of back and forth and trying to figure out how to do this. I think the most responsible way to bake public art into our city is to look at our capital improvement plan and find out where there's opportunity to do these things and where and how that money can be included in those capital project budgets. I think that that's the model that we're working toward. I know that the Public Art Commission works and reviews the capital improvement plan to look for opportunities for these projects. Not every project, obviously, is appropriate for public art, but there are higher profile projects where we should be baking stuff into that. Now, the level of expenditure and how we decide on what the art is, I think that we still have to work on a better and more transparent process for that. But I think that a city without public art is a city without whimsy and without joy and without creativity. And if everything is just, we can only afford to have a blank wall, or we can only afford to have a parking deck with brick and not with any art, I think that says a lot about who we are. And that's not who we are in Ann Arbor.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Silkworth, same questions to you, sir. What is your view of the current city funding model and process for public art? Would you recommend any changes? If so, what would they be?
Well, I'll be honest, I'm not familiar with that particular model, and but I do know that the city does frequently approve the spending resources on public art, and for me, it's about priorities. Everybody likes public art. It's nice, but what we like more are, properly maintained and repaired roads, our safe crosswalks, our adequately lit adequate street lighting for our neighborhoods. I mean, it's about a sense of priorities. I love art, it's great, but when we have so many other really urgent needs right now because of different spending platforms that have been taken, I think we need to get our priorities straight. We need to focus on essential services and basic infrastructure. Let's get back to basics. Let's get our city improved, and then we can think about expanding into public art and other things as people want.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, candidates, for answering those questions. That brings us now to our closing statements. And Mr. Silkworth, you begin with your closing statement of 2 minutes.
Good evening. So I'm a progressive Democrat, and I'm running for city council because I've heard so many people in my ward who are so very concerned about what's happening to our city. They feel like they're being left out of the process. And my opponent, well, he actually did vote to keep them out of the process on the library lot. He did cast that vote that excluded them from having an opportunity to participate at the ballot box on the library lot issue last fall. And that's 2,000 Ward 5 voters. They wanted to be heard there. You should have listened. I would have. And I will always listen when thousands of people raise their hand and ask to be counted. This isn't rocket science. You don't have to have a great pedigree or fancy degrees to be a city council person. You have to listen to people, and you have to understand what their concerns are, and you have to ask staff to help solve those problems. That's it. It's really simple. So anyway, please visit my website, votedavidsilkworth.org, and my Facebook page, David Silkworth for City Council, for more information about my campaign. And I want to thank voters for watching this and for the League for hosting it. And everyone have a great night.
Mr. Silkworth, and now, Mr. Smith, your closing statement.
2 years ago, I ran for City Council to bring more engaged and forward-thinking leadership to City Hall. I pledged to make government work better for the citizens of Ann Arbor, and that's exactly what I've done. During my tenure, I've been responsible for more than 40 adopted resolutions and pieces of legislation. On my watch, I helped to lead the fight to strengthen the 1,4-dioxane standard to keep our drinking water safe and to get the city into court to work for a real cleanup of the Gelman plume. I've helped to enact a vulnerable road user ordinance. I've helped to expand local funding for street, sidewalk, bicycle, and crosswalk improvements. And I've helped to commit to the Paris Climate Accord's carbon emission goals. I'm also engaged with residents. I'm always willing to meet with folks to discuss any issue facing the city. I host monthly coffee hours and try and personally respond to residents' concerns. Providing information to folks so they can solve problems and advocate for positions is a huge part of being an elected official, and one I'm good at. I'm running for re-election to make sure Ann Arbor is a remarkable place for everyone. To do this, we need to address affordability. We need to continue to improve the provision of basic services. We need to keep working on making our transportation network safe and accessible for everybody. And we need to look forward and fund programs that reduce our emissions and mitigate the impacts of climate change. To do these things, we need responsible development. Responsible development allows folks to live closer to their jobs, especially lower-wage workers. It's affordable. It responds to the context of its surroundings. It looks good, and it creates memorable spaces. We need responsible development if we're going to address affordability in Ann Arbor, if we're going to reduce our carbon emissions, and especially if we're serious about housing equity. We have a responsibility to future generations that we make sure Ann Arbor is as special for them as it is to us. I'm Councilmember Chip Smith, and I'd be honored to have your vote in the August 8th Democratic primary.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and thank you, candidates.
Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for participating in tonight's forum, and to CTN for making the program possible. These forums will be rebroadcast on Channel 19 a number of times between now and the election and are available on demand for streaming on your computer and smartphone. Go to our website, lwvannarbor.org, and look for the link to programs. For additional balanced, nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot issues, go to vote411.org and enter your address. There you will find information on the candidates and ballot proposals that will appear on your ballot. Be sure to vote on August 8th. Good night.